Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m, Wednesday, the 10th of June, and you are watching episode 10 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight to issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode are my guests, Ned Makin, a current Vice President and past National President and life member of the Australian Pig Doggers and Hunters Association. He hunts pigs and trains dogs on contract from his base in Inverell, northern New South Wales, and is an advocate for the contribution that legal and ethical hunting makes to the community. And Mark Beatie, a current Vice President of Australian Doggers and Hunters Association, Queensland, formerly the National President and proud life member. He is based just north of Caboolture, Queensland, and is an avid pig dogger and advocate for all legal and ethical hunting. Ned, after last night's Origin game, you have bragging rights, so I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you became a serious pig dogger and hunter?
Well, I'm still not terribly serious. I still think I'm very funny, but the whole pig dogging thing for me, it's a bit challenging to explain in that I didn't choose it. I felt like it chose me. It was when I bumped into it at about, when I was a kid, I'd seen dogs work and whatnot, and then I was taken out by some useful hunters when I was about 15, so it's 1975. And as soon as I saw that I just decided that's what I'm going to do. And so by 17, I had a vehicle and, had places to hunt and all that sort of thing, and I've been doing it ever since. So for me, it's not exactly a choice. It's just the thing I want to do. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. I love working with the dogs, and I absolutely love being in the bush, of course. And as I've got a bit older, I've thought that it's worth putting a little bit back into it to try and help keep it alive for future generations. I've got grandkids. I'd like them to have the option of choosing whether to hunt or not.
Okay, second up, we've got Mark.
My story is fairly similar. I remember as a child, my parents had a bit of an interest in a pig farm, and I had an old cattle dog and a Labrador actually, and it was my job to keep the feral pigs away from the sty pigs, and I loved it. And it I thought those dogs were the best in the world. They clearly weren't, but it was only I think 13 acres we were on, so there was no rifles involved. It had to be guns. Had to be dogs, and it grew from there. We moved to Townsville, and again, it was my job to go down the road and get some pig legs to put in the crab pots. Go crabbing on a Friday night. It just grew from there, and as Ned said, it just seems to happen around. Everywhere you go, it just, as when you're a young fella, it just seems to come to you more than you chase it. And I'm the same. I want to give something a lot back now that, we're doing it for so long. It's about time we go something back, and I really enjoy what we're doing at the moment.
I suppose over the years, you've seen a lot of changes, and especially changes in attitude from people in regards to, well, I think people are so far removed now from their food sources, and hunting is so foreign to such a bulk of the population. Do you find it sort of annoying or frustrating in regards to the attitude of maybe sort of city dwellers and their expectations of what you should and shouldn't be doing?
Well, for me, it's not so much frustrating. It's just the reality of the situation. We're one of the most urbanised countries on earth. We've got the image of being, all sort of outback dwellers and crocodile wrestlers, but we're not. We mostly live in big cities. The vast majority of the population is in a tiny, weeny area of Australia. So it's natural that in the past, a lot of those people had relatives or had family members on property, so they got to go on holidays and things like that. They learnt something about rural and regional life. Of course, that's changed. A lot of farming families got out. A lot of corporations are involved now in farming and agriculture. So we've lost that link. between the two lifestyles. So for me, it's not annoying. It's just that's the challenge, is to understand how the rest of Australia thinks, and try and get our message across. It's not a matter of fighting with them or arguing with them or something like that. I just think it's up to us to get the message across that pig hunting is a legitimate lifestyle. It's a cultural activity, and it does a lot of good for agriculture and the environment.
100% agree.
One of the things I've noticed, but I suppose it's going to happen more and more, is with the population disbursement. I mean, if you go back in history, the bulk of people in Australia up until the 1950s lived in regional Australia. As after the World War II, mechanisation came into force in a big way on agricultural land, and the population sort of in the regional areas dwindled. And so I suspect that's what you're sort of pointing to, and we've just got to come to face that fact. But it is sort of really concerning that the rate of growth in the cities is outpacing regional areas at such a great rate that we are really being sort of marginalised in a lot of things that we do. I think in Queensland at the moment, for every person that comes into regional Queensland, 17 or so people come into southeast Queensland in that highly urbanised area. So we're going to just have to deal, like you say, we have to deal with it. But by the same token, I hope we can sort of encourage people through lifestyle and amenities and that to attract more people into regional areas and sort of preserve some of the lifestyle.
Yeah, well, in our experience, there's an awful lot of urban pig hunters as well. Certainly in the APDHA, there's a huge proportion of members who are from urban areas, and they come out into the regions. They spend their money in the regions. A lot of them make a specific decision to get their tyres or their whatever they need for their vehicles when they go out into regional areas, so that they can contribute to the economy. There is some flow, but the challenge is to be able to communicate. Pardon me. Some of the needs of regional areas, and one of those is pest management. There's a million other things that need to be done in regional areas as well, but the realities of pest management are sometimes overlooked, I think.
I'm sort of semi-rural where I am, and there's a lot of small crop farms, strawberries, macadamia nuts. They employ a lot of people from town. That I think that we've done a lot of good to educate, because they see the damage that the pigs do during the day while they're working, and I go in there at night time and get rid of them. And they can't believe that they were that close to a living animal. As you say, they're disconnected.
Mm.
But
can I just share a photo of some of these animals? I mean, to me, they're quite terrifying for the size of them. So here's Ned with one of his creatures that he's taken care of, and there's one of yours, Mark. Now, can you just give us an idea of the size of these things and the weight of some of these male boars?
Around the nut farms on the back of Gympie, it's not unheard of to get 200 kilos. It doesn't happen all the time. That one that I got there was about 120, I think, and that would have been within 8 k's from Caboolture, living near some strawberries. So they come right in close. They quite regularly get them at 100 kilos.
Yeah, sort of 100 kilos, and for people my age, that's dressed, and for younger people, that's live weight. But 100 kilos is sort of a magic marker. You know, that's where we say, okay, that's a proper size boar, and it doesn't. It's just a notional figure. It used to matter when they were going into the box, like into a chiller for sale, because that was a good earn. But certainly 100, they get over 100 kilos dressed. I had the good fortune or the misfortune to bump into a couple near Gogango in central Queensland in 1985, and I would say they were brothers, but they came off the same sorghum crop a week apart, and they dressed 170 and 175. So I know that if Mark says they can get 200, I know that I certainly haven't caught the biggest pigs in Australia, so they can get that big. The average, though, is smaller, and the size of the pig is relevant in terms of how much they eat. They eat about 3% of their body weight or 4% of their body weight a day. So the bigger the pig, the more they eat. The big boars, of course, can be more damaging to livestock. The ones that are eating the most of the crops, though, of course, are the sows that are always pregnant or always feeding young. So it's not just the big rank-looking pigs that matter. It's all those breeders and things that have got to be cleaned up as well. But that's why the sows are out more often. You see more sows because they have higher feed demands, and they can they'll move in family groups. They can just have an absolutely devastating effect on.
Okay, can I just share another screen for a sec? This is the area where in red where the distribution of feral pigs. So it covers a lot of territory.
It's interesting,
and they do a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's interesting if you look at there's a good map that exists of the watersheds of the various watersheds in Australia, the various river systems and so on. And the area that's blank of pigs is, in terms of watersheds, the driest area in Australia. Pigs follow water. They love water. They have to have water. They have to have it every day. They have no tolerance for being dry. So that map almost perfectly mirrors the major watersheds in Australia. So there's, say, over where Exmouth is, over on that far western point, there's only 1% of the water runoff in Australia goes out there in a massive area, and it's devoid of pigs. Likewise, the centre areas in South Australia and a lot of the rest of WA. So water is the key, and of course with water comes cropping and productive land, livestock and so on. The pigs can live, they can live, like down here it's snowing at the moment, they're all, the pigs are fine. They're all just living in the snow. They also live in the ridiculous heat of Western Queensland and parts of the Northern Territory. They're a terribly adaptable animal, and they can just be anywhere.
I'll just share another of the damage they do. They certainly make a mess of the land through digging it up, and it's usually wetlands and riverbanks. Now, in Queensland, the old cane farmers and get a thrashing from the government in regards to runoff. But I've had people talk about the amount of sediment that feral pigs throw into the river system can be quite devastating as well. A lot more than any general cane farmer will deliberately put into the water system.
Yeah, that is true. Around, say, for instance, around the back of Kilcoy, wherever they have a very bad Parthenium problem there, and wherever the pigs have been rooting the ground up like that, usually the next March, Parthenium comes up out of the areas that they've been rooting. So, what basically they're ploughing a field, ready for the next weed to come along. So if it doesn't get washed away, like you showed there, and it goes into the rivers, it becomes a haven for weeds. So we've found a lot of these areas are that's where we can help the farmers as well, is get in and stop them from doing that rooting up, so they can only grow the crops that they want to grow. And it happens a fair bit around here, actually.
In our area, we're up in Cairns, and my next door neighbour's son has big dogs and hunts. But there's 24 million pigs, so you're not going to make a dent in them by hunting them with dogs. But what I can gather is the selective method in regards to when a cane farmer up here has a problem, he'll get someone in and they'll just take care of his particular problem, and that satisfies his land management thing. Is that what you find that you're more key to do, that you can pinpoint an area where they're having trouble and help rid the problem, or at least cut down the problem? Is that do you think that's more your task than trying to eradicate a bulk of feral pigs?
Just speak for myself. It's well, eradication of pigs is just an impossibility. We're just never going to get the last pig out of the last blackberry bush in the last gully, in Australia. It's about management on a bigger scale, and how useful hunters are depends partly on the relationship between the hunter and the landholder. So if you're just sort of, happily running around catching a few pigs, that's great. You're going to get rid of a few pigs here and there. If you can talk to the landholder on a different level, and if you're prepared to haunt a property and get to know it really well, you can develop manage it. Yeah, that's right. You can certainly manage the numbers on a property, and for a lot of us, you're doing it on several adjoining properties. Because if you're going to do anything about pest animals of any description, you've got to take a landscape approach, because they don't recognise any boundaries, any borders, anything like that. So you've got to follow the landscape. So they will live within a certain patch, usually of a creek. They might cross a few ridges and things like that. But the DNA studies we've been involved with in the Northern Territory shows that they'll live on one side of a particular river. They'll all have the same broad DNA. The pigs across the river will have a completely different DNA. They're a completely different origin, a completely different family history. So you can, the other research that we've got too shows that pigs will stay in an area. Even if they're hunted, they will stay within a home range. So you can certainly smash a localised group of pigs, but we don't suggest that hunting is the way. It's one of the ways of managing pigs. There's trapping, there's shooting them out of choppers, there's poisoning. There's a whole lot of things that can and need to be done to manage pigs. Part of the difficulty is the coordination of all of those things in an effective way, in my opinion.
I suppose what I'm talking about is in a sort of surgical operation for one particular landowner or a plot. So that seems to be the thing up here in regards to where the farmers actually engage a pig hunter to take care of a certain problem. So it's sort of a localised surgical removal of a problem on a plot.
Oh, sure. And I mean, that's some of the ways it's done. But it was a cane farm is a different thing to 100,000 acres of cattle country too. So you can go in and say, there's that pig, it's coming down. Sometimes though, the issue is it's coming down and going back into public land.
The national park.
Yeah, so a national park or something like that. So the issue is you can't follow them in there. You can't actually do a landscape sort of management plan because of the land tenure. So you're limited to what you can do. In some, especially cane country, in the north, it's often very close to, sensitive environmental areas of national parks and things like that. So that's more the limiting factor than the dogs or the hunters, in my opinion.
Well, just on that, a lot of people landowners sort of think the worst neighbour you can have is the government, like a national park and that, because it's just a breeding ground for feral animals and noxious weeds. It seems that the last group of people that actually look after their asset is the government in their national parks and that, which to me seems strange, where you think, well, they'd have applying a constant role or a constant plan to get rid of all sorts of feral animals and noxious weeds on their turf, if you know what I mean. I suppose they were considered the worst neighbours, but I think probably up here now, on the peninsula especially, I think the worst neighbours would have to be the NGOs that come up, buy up land holdings, and then just lock them up and walk away, and don't do anything. Just walk away from it, don't manage it, and just let it go back to sort of nature. But nature now has changed, that it's got noxious weeds and feral animals in it and it becomes a haven for them, rather than a normal landowner usually manages his asset and controls those sort of things.
Yeah, but all we can do in our situation is just hunt the land that we're allowed to do at this stage, and they might become breeding grounds for the neighbours. I mean, the national parks, state forests, but all we can do is concentrate on the adjoining blocks at this stage, because we aren't allowed in there. It does frustrate us. We'd love to be able to get in.
Do you know of any active government management plans that sort of tries to manage feral pigs and feral animals on state land, or is it just?
I'm aware of them. I don't think the issue is necessarily a lack of a plan. I think it's a lack of staff. There's an enormous amount of land to manage, and I just don't know if the staff are available. There's certainly plans, and we occasionally get asked advice on different things, like for instance with the African swine fever here. The input of hunters and things is regularly sought on a lot of management issues. Well, certainly with the APDHA, it's sought from us. But again, we're pig hunters. We're looking to manage, the pigs we can. We're not a party to government policy, particularly in Queensland. In New South Wales, say in the Northern Territory, there's hunting on public land that works. That's worked well. New South Wales has been going now for 10 or 15 years or something like that. Hasn't been an accident. There hasn't been even close to a dangerous incident. It's well managed. In the Northern Territory, there's national parks that are open to hunting, and we're involved in that as well. So as are other groups. So there's different models that are used in different places in Australia. What we'd encourage any government to do is to not overlook the contribution of volunteers. Certainly there are management systems that can use volunteers effectively in situations like this. But again, that's outside our purview. We make a point of staying within our lane, and that's that we'll work with whomever to advance legal, ethical pig hunting, whether that's on public or private land.
Just a bit further than that, I mean, Queensland government's got a policy at the moment to sort of increase its land or its land holding, national parks and that, 17% of the land mass. I think New South Wales has just bought a big 150 odd hectare piece of land near the South Australian border. So if they're sort of a bit pressed to manage what they've got, it seems a bit of a risk to sort of take on more workload if they haven't got the staff. So that's sort of one sort of thing that they probably should consider. In regards to, we'll sort of move on to the dogs now, because, or before we finish that, is I've seen the dogs all ready to go for pig hunting, and they've got their breastplates on, they've got their trackers. This is a matter of interest. What protection are you wearing in regards to getting close to these animals.
Our wits.
No, yeah, but if there's not a lot you can do to protect yourself from a pig, that's why the way you hunt changes as you get older. Like Mark and I are elderly pig hunters now, and we have to box clever. You know, when you're young, you can move a lot faster. But look, if you've got good dogs and a good strategy, you seldom get into trouble. It can happen, but yeah, the main thing that in our minds is the welfare of the dogs and keeping them as safe as they can, getting to them as quickly as possible. And there's also the issue of the welfare of the pigs. Like certainly they're a pest animal and all that sort of thing, but the objective is to get everything done as quickly and cleanly as possible.
Just on the dogs, I haven't seen dogs so well looked after and pampered, as far as dogs go, as some of the pig dogs that my neighbour's son's got. I mean, they're forever sort of caring for them and also ensuring that they're well housed and everything. Do you find that most doggers, if you had a competition, do you think you could have people show you their accommodation? Some you would be envious of living in yourself, or is it not that grand?
Well, look, there's blokes that have got fantastic setup. The commonality with pig doggers is their love of their dog and their respect for them, you know. And from a practical point of view, you've got to keep them in good condition. You've got to keep them well housed so that they're ready for the job. They're athletes, you know. They're athletes. Yeah, they have to be well fed. They have to be well maintained. Pig doggers have great relationships with their vets because that's part of the process, you know, making sure they're vaccinated, making sure they're in good condition, having a check, all that sort of thing. But see, you know, as I said earlier, it's snowing here, so the dogs have got to have good accommodation. Otherwise, well, apart from it being, you know, terribly uncomfortable for them, they lose condition and they don't want to work. So
maybe you should run a competition between your members and that who looks after, who's got the most luxurious palace for their dogs, and give them a prize. I'm sure you'd have a lot of entries.
That's quite a good idea.
Just on the dogs, I mean, they're a working dog, but I mean, I'm just a city person sort of thing, and never been connected to the country. But I was quite surprised when the dogs are sort of on downtime and just around the household sort of thing, or on their property. How sort of, well, they're not docile, but they're quite friendly. Like they're calm. They're not, just, and if anything, friendly, as anything. But then when there's a bit of a rattle going on that something's got to, they're going to go hunting, and the tails come up, and the excitement's really there, and none of them like getting left back. I've noticed that, because sometimes you might have a number of dogs, up to 6 dogs or something, and sometimes one of them you might consider is not fit enough to go or something like that. And gee, their nose is out of joint that they're being left behind.
They love it. I've got an old bitch here that can't jump in the ute anymore. It's a shame. She was a magnificent animal. But if I hold the breastplate up and rattle it like that, she flies in like a gazelle. But yeah, she's the same. When she was younger, she just lay around the yard, and it was loved to play with kids and the neighbour's cat and whatever. But yeah, put a breastplate on it, and they come alive. Flick a switch. And
I think that would surprise a lot of people. Like people haven't come across them and think of big dogs and that. I mean, they probably think of other stupid dogs that are fighting dogs, and uncontrollable things. But I mean, big dogs, they're so calm, they're so well trained. The ones that I've come across, of course, and I expect all of them are. But I think that would be surprising to most people who have got nothing, nothing to do, because they just think, if you're going out hunting pigs, you've got to have some big brawny dog sort of, look like a massive or something. But some of these dogs, they're pretty close to greyhound-like in stature. Like they're athletic, like you say, they're athletes. They're not a lot of bulk in them. They're really different to a lot of people would think.
They look like an average dog. If any dog that's got a job, is well fed, well housed, and really well exercised, is happy. And I believe that it all boils down to that. I could grab my dogs, throw them in the cage in the back, and go over to say a mate's place who the dogs have never met. I wouldn't do this, but I would guarantee that I could let his dogs jump in the back in the cage with mine, and there'd be no dramas at all, because they know where they're going and they love it. Very well behaved.
Like I said, I don't know. He's just clicked. I can't see him there anymore. He must have had something to do. But no, there's definitely. I think there's a big difference in what people think pig dogs are and what they actually are.
I think in the early days, in say the 60s and the 70s, a pig dog from then is way different to a pig dog now. A modern dog is bred for its agility. It's bred for how it reacts in the yard when it's not hunting. It's not to have any human or dog aggression. They're basically a super pet, and I put them. I'm not belittling people's pets, but I put them a step above the average mutt that's in the backyard, be it a pedigree or a crossbreed.
With the training of the dogs, do people usually do it themselves, or do they call on sort of people who had more experience in that to train them as well, or what's the training regime like?
Dogs love to hunt. Doesn't matter what sort of dogs they are, they'll hunt. Some do it better than others. So with people like myself that have had dogs for decades, usually find that the younger dogs just do exactly what the older dogs do. And for me, it's simple. For people that just want to start straight up, it can be a little bit harder. Well, it's a lot harder. And they're better off going with people that
I'm back.
Welcome back. And it makes a very big difference if your dog is learning to hunt with both people that know what they're doing and other dogs that know what they're doing. It shaves many months off the time.
Do you train dogs? Do you train dogs for other people and sell them on, or do you train dogs and sell them on, or do you take on other people's dogs and train them? Or
people send me dogs for a month at a time, and I train them depending on what stage they are. It'll depend on where they end up. Apologies too. It's with the snow and the cold and everything like that. We had a little bit of a power thing, and we've got an alternative source now, so I'm back on. But look,
it's global warming.
Yeah, the training is all about focusing the dog's attention so that they have what you're trying to do is to install and encourage an on-off switch. And before I left, you were talking about how calm the dogs can be when they're not on. That's what you're looking for. The signal of being on is the vehicle starting, or the buggy starting, or the breastplates coming out, or they see the trackers and that sort of thing. And so what you're doing essentially is limiting all the dog's options so that they feel like they don't have to work. There's no need to guard. There's no need to worry about food. There's no need to resource guard. There's all that sort of thing you're trying to eliminate through your management of the dog. And the only thing they're allowed to do is if they smell a pig, go and find it and confront it, whether they have contact with it or whether they just bark at it. It's all about the minimum. You want the minimum necessary energy used the minimum sort of engagement with the dog, with the pig, partly because that conserves a lot of energy. And then I came in when Mark was talking about if you can train them with another dog, they learn an awful lot from another dog that knows what they're doing. They will stay within the bounds that that other dog has created. So the object is to have them calm, you know, because that's the most efficient thing. In the same way that police dogs aren't chasing people up and down the street. Police dogs walk along, you can pat them, you can do all these sorts of things. If the policeman says, grab that person, they'll grab that person. So in the same way that a police dog, say, or a drug sniffer dog can have an on and off switch, so it's the same with big dogs. And that's what you're looking to do when you're training them, is managing that. Whether you do it through a formal trainer or whether people are doing it at home, as many thousands of people are, that's the objective, is to have an on-off switch so they know when to work and when not to work.
Just continue on with the dogs. I mean, from the group of dogs that my neighbour's son has, there's some that, well, they're all got a similar sort of sleek build sort of in them, but they're definitely not a particular breed, if you know what I mean. They're a particular look or a particular design of dog, but they still vary in height from, quite tall to, well, they're never really short, but the thing is they do have physical differences, but they obviously come from a lot of different gene lines. Now, is that the characteristic of most pig dogs, that they come from, or for a better word, a lot of mixed breeding situations? Like there's no particular breed you focus on. It's just the dog itself, the character of the dog.
Yeah, the breeding of pig dogs at its top level can be about a certain look, because the people who are very, very good breeders can get the combination of characteristics in terms of abilities into a similar body. I breed a few dogs, and so does my family. We're not chasing a particular body because we don't think we're good enough breeders to do that. A body emerges because there's a say in the state of origin last night, they're all different shapes and sizes.
It didn't take you long.
But they're all different shapes and sizes. But what they have in common at that level is is to have pace, endurance, focus on the ball, and on one day one team's better, and on another day another team's better. Now some of that is how they're managed too. So it is with dogs. You can get a whole lot of different breeds of dogs. So if you picked a dog like a Kelpie, say for instance, a breed of dogs like Kelpie. Kelpies are used in pig dogs. Not every Kelpie is going to make it a pig dog. Some Kelpies want, they show a propensity for that. And in the same way that that's nothing to do with size or anything like that, there is athleticism required. There's an urge to follow a scent. Some dogs have that urge, some dogs don't. There's an urge to, there's a great interest in pigs in some dogs. All dogs react to a pig, some one way or another. Some of them run away, some of them, every dog from Pomeranians up, if they see a pig, they will have a reaction because it's a smelly thing. It's a thing with a certain presence. So what you're looking for when you're breeding is the type. If you're breeding yourself, you're looking for the type of dog that you like. And that varies from, in different areas. Where I am, there's lots of blackberry bushes. So you have to follow a dog into the blackberry bush because it's followed the pig in. A great big dog isn't necessarily very good in blackberries because it's a tangle. You need something that can get in and follow a pig in a pig tunnel quickly and engage the pig and hold it effectively. So sizes can vary quite significantly depending on the country. So if you're in great big open country where there's stubble paddocks and things like that, big long-legged fast dog is probably going to get you a lot of pigs. If you're in blackberries, a dog that will actively pursue pigs quickly into blackberries will help. But likewise, you might have a really fast dog to try and catch the pig before it hits the flag. So people are structuring their team based on how they hunt, the country they hunt. And they're all at their own pace.
With the dogs, when you go out, in general, how many dogs do you take? Would a hunter normally take? Would he take 4 or 5 or 6, or just even less than that? Because that seems, from my neighbour's son, he doesn't always take every dog out, and sometimes sometimes when he does it at night, he might keep it down to 3, whereas in a daytime thing, you might take 4 or more. So, do you have any sort of generalisations in regards to what a number of dogs and how that team's made up of those dogs, or are there characteristics within the team as a leader and different jobs that they do, or how they work together?
I know with myself locally, with the smaller blocks around home, I don't like to take too many because they'll egg each other on and they'll end up next door where I may or may not have permission to hunt. There's that comes into it. Whether it's heavily timbered or open country, I usually only take 3 as a maximum. There is one place around here that's got a very big boar that has been giving me the slip a bit lately, and I take a couple of extra ones for him because I want him well held before I go in there. But it really does depend a lot on the country, the type of dogs you got. See, some people use bailiffs and they'll have 3 or 4. Others use holding dogs. Some dogs hold one out, some won't. So it depends on, on country and on the type. Again, back to the type of dogs there is.
There's no hard and fast rule.
No.
And it's a function too of whether there's an old saying, 1 dog, 1 brain, 2 dogs, half a brain. If the more dogs you've got, the same goes for boys. That was what my father used to say. But the more dogs you've got, and then depending on how experienced they are, you might be able to run more dogs if they're all experienced dogs and will split up and do their own thing. But you don't need 2 dogs is enough for 99% of pigs that you're going to come across in your life. 1 dog will be, good enough. The right dog, 1 dog up for most pigs. If you've got a nightmare scenario which you can strike, then you might need some more. But how many dogs is a function of how many you can manage easily. It's not just well, I've got 5 dogs, I'll take 5 dogs. You might have 5 dogs on the vehicle, but you might only have 1 at a time. The rest are in reserve. You run them on when another dog's tired or something like that. So how many you take? They're not all just running around. People, use them selectively. They might be loose if they're all experienced.
But then you've got to run around. So you're going to get the more dogs and they're going in a different direction, that's more you've got to run it around. So you're going to get tired. You don't want that.
Well, no, my whole life is geared around not getting tired.
Well, I did have the opportunity to go to your Facebook page, and I watched that last video that was up there, and it was I suppose, gently chastising people who took too long to take action on a pig that was caught. So can I just get a bit of an idea in regards to how you work yourself in regards to like making sure that you can get to a pig fairly promptly after your dog's caught it, or is it a bit harder than that?
Well, I'm 61, so I used to be able to run like anything, and I could run pigs down on my own. It's hard to believe if you ever see me now. But so I was very confident when I was younger that I could get to the pig quickly. Once you hit a certain age, you've got to, and this doesn't apply to the majority of pig hunters in Australia, are between sort of 18 and 32-year-old men. So they're in reasonably good shape by then at that stage. The way I do it personally is I've switched from having all hard finding dogs, that's dogs that will find a pig and grab it. Now I've got a mix of bailing dogs that find a pig and bark at it, keep it in one spot, and some hard dogs that will grab it if necessary. I bought a buggy. I drive around in a little buggy now rather than trying to run. I have quick release solenoids set up on the buggy so that I can pick and choose when a dog gets loose. So they're not all just charging around. If I need a dog, I've got one. So the longer you're in it, the more you modify things so that you can achieve your objectives. And the video you're talking about was Greg Tompkins, who's a great dog handler, good pig hunter, all that sort of stuff. He's a committee member of ours, and he was making the point that the welfare of the pig is as important as anything else that's going on in the hunt. So you can't just stand around it's also illegal to stand around filming a pig when you could be dispatching it. Yeah, your job is to get it on the ground and kill it, not to stand around and let dogs have a bit of a chew. So people who are filming that are exposing themselves to prosecution, and rightly so. It's against the law. So what he's trying to say to people is, don't muck about, get in there. So that's where you have to start thinking, how do I get there quickly? Again, if you've got 6 dogs and you're by yourself, you might not be able to get to a pig quickly if they've all got one pig. So you might modify the number of dogs you're running. In my case, I use dogs that are going to bark at a pig so that I can drive up to it in a buggy or walk up to it with a dog in a lead now, so that I can be on a pig within a couple of seconds of the dogs touching it. That's better for the dogs. It's better for the pig. It's certainly a lot better for me.
What about your experience, Matt?
Oh, I'm very similar, actually. I use a quad these days, where years ago I was built like a match with a wood shaved off, where all that's sort of filled in now. And I used to be able to run them down, but now I've changed the dogs I use. The dogs, when they leave either the ute or the quad, I don't want them to go as far as I used to. Before it was, they can go a kilometre, I don't care, I'll get there. Now it's no, I leave those ones at home, or I very rarely use them unless I have to. And it's just the short range finders, get there quick, get the job done, move on to the next one. It's getting old is not a lot of fun. But
it's just a natural event, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well,
just in regards to, does the association have a code of ethics sort of that for its members, and sort of routinely reminds them of their responsibilities and that?
Well, we certainly have a code of ethics, and we're always looking at ways of communicating with the members. We're all volunteers, of course. We're looking to improve all the time in terms of our communication with members, their rights, their responsibilities, that sort of thing. We certainly push the animal welfare issue, because that's a huge factor. People can deal with the death of pest animals. The general community doesn't want to see any animal treated unreasonably. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment, and we've actually made some suggestions to the Queensland government in a review they're doing of their animal welfare laws at the moment about education and formalising some of the education so that they can be sure, and the community can be sure, as can we, that people understand their responsibilities in relation to animal welfare.
Is there any other associations similar to yours in regards to feral pigs, like you're the pig doggers and hunters? Is there any other specific organisations, or it's basically all the pig hunters who use dogs under that one umbrella?
Oh, there's clubs. There's various clubs around in different districts, but I don't believe there's any other association that I know of, especially in Queensland.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. We've taken a national role, and and I mean, if there was someone else, great, more the merrier.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, so we don't have any issues with that. But yeah, as far as we know, that we're certainly the only body that's talking to the government about pig hunting.
In regards to commercial pig hunting and that, would there, in more outlying areas, is there a program where there's hunters with firearms to dispatch them, like on ground and maybe aerial? Is that part of management control as well, as far as federal pigs go?
Oh, yeah, various government agencies have access to contractors who do all sorts of stuff. There's certainly helicopter shooters, and that's a specific qualification that someone has to have. It's not done for recreation or anything like that. There's you know, you've got to have a license to handle 1080 and that sort of thing. There's plenty of people chasing pigs, be it professionally for what's left of the export trade, either on contract for the government or some landholders, and for cultural reasons and you know, recreational reasons. There's the pigs are getting attention from people with all sorts of things, from pointy sticks up, I suppose. Like, there's not just doggers, you know, trying to get on the pigs, and they're everywhere. There's people in remote areas are. Well, you know, pig hunting is part of the pastime in that area, but it's also an essential part of the community management of these issues. So, I mean, there's a ton of shooters out there, as well as a heap of doggers. There's, as I said, there's, you know, professional poison officers. You know, there's a lot of people at these pigs, and I think everyone's contributing, and just in terms of long term, more activity the better, provided there's some level of coordination, I suppose.
In regards to dispatching the animal, can you give us a bit of an idea how you dispatch an animal and how long it takes to sort of, you know, I say pass away or sort of?
Well, we kill them, so that's. We don't shy away from that. They can be shot.
I'm just trying to be gentle about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it isn't a game of tennis. It has an end result, same as an abattoir does. There's two ways that are considered acceptable, and one, of course, is a shot to the head. You know, so with pig dogging, that would be a bailed pig. You put them in the head once you pull the dogs out of the way and shoot it while it's standing there. Now, you can't always get a shot at the pig. So the other way to kill them is with a knife. You've got to get hold of it, and you stick them in the heart or in the throat. You're not cutting their throat. What you're looking to do is to cut the major blood veins, arteries. So it's either here, and it goes straight in there, or in the heart, and the closest way to get to that is under a front leg. In terms of how quick it is, for a person who's trained properly and shown how, if you hit them in the heart, they fall over. That's it. People sometimes have an issue with that because it looks messy and they assume it'll be painful. There's various information that disputes that, but I can tell you from my own experience, as a young and over-enthusiastic bloke of about 19, I stuck myself in the throat just here, and I can tell you that you don't feel anything because as soon as you start losing a lot of blood, your body just focuses on your chest. It's just trying to keep everything pumping, keep your organs working. And your experience, I couldn't feel anything. So it's that coupled with adrenaline and things like that does make it a humane death if you're good at it, and you can be shown by someone how to do it properly.
So is that, Mark, is that your normal way of doing it? Is yours a knife death for your animals in the majority of cases?
99, unless I leave the dogs behind and I've just got a rifle with me, but with the dogs, it's always a knife. I don't have any bailers at the moment, so I use holding dogs. So the dogs hold the pig, I stick it, it's dead. It really is a short amount of time if it's done properly.
Well, I suppose running through the scrub and that wouldn't be overly safe with a firearm, especially a rifle or that. So it's more likely to injure yourself or whatever. So do you sort of expect pig hunters to, in your situation, use the knife, 99% of the time?
Again, it depends on the dogs. I find with rifles that it's not so much the bullet coming out of the end of it that's going to do me any damage. So I get tangled up with it. They're just too long. But with the knife, it only comes out when you need it. You don't run along with it in your hand. So it's, majority of hunters, I'd say, would use a knife. With holding dogs, they would. Yeah. When with bailers, then it's a whole different story. You have to use a rifle then. But again, it's safe enough. Once you know what you're doing, you can run with the rifle over your shoulder. And they usually use the shorter carbine type ones that don't get tangled up in the scrub.
Some of it's a function of the country you're in, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, like exactly. It's exactly really, it depends on where you are.
Country, it becomes a nightmare. The pigs aren't just sort of standing on a rifle range. They're out of there. And they can be in lignum, they can be in lantana, they can be in rubber bomb, they can certainly be in blackberries. They can be in cane grass, they can be in gamba grass, they can be in all sorts of things that don't allow you a clean, humane shot at them. Rifles are a quick death if used properly, but you've got to have a clear shot. So that's another reason that people use knives, is they can absolutely guarantee where that's going and what's going to happen.
That's another reason why people use dogs too, because to shoot a pig, you've got to see it, and if you can't see it in, say, a sugarcane patch, how are you going to shoot it? So that's where the dogs come in. So every tool that we use depends on the country, and no one thing is best.
In regards to the carcass, what sort of percentage of the carcass of the total hunt, for your hunters, would they use? Is there, like you were saying before in the initial part there, Mark, about using a leg, go and get a pig and get a leg and put it in a crab pot. Yep. So is there any sort of market or anything you can do with the carcass, or you just got to leave it there, or what do you need to do with a carcass?
Again, it depends on where you are. If you're accredited, you can take them to a chiller, obviously, and sell them there. A lot of people eat them. A lot of people eat the feral pigs. I do myself, not all of them, but quite a bit. And then, of course, there's dog food. My dogs eat a fair bit of pork, wild pork that they've caught themselves. It's but if you go out and get a dozen pigs and they're all between 40 and 60 k's, that's a lot of meat. and unfortunately, see, in America, they have a thing called Hunt for the Homeless, I think it's called, where all that meat, they have special weekends and all the meat is carved up and handed to the homeless. It's a wonderful idea. There's no way in the world we can do that here. There's too many laws and regulations to prohibit that.
They can't even have a sausage sizzle without about a permit and then a handle. You've got to have food handling training and that. So the old sausage sizzle's almost out the door, which is sort of ridiculous, but that's the way life is now.
You got to put the onions on the right way too, apparently.
I suppose you've got to make sure it's not too hot so they burn their mouths either. So, we just touch on biosecurity and this African swine. What is it? Swine flu or African fever? Yeah. What's the ramifications of that getting into the country and then sort of being spread by ferals into sty pigs. And have we got a decent biosecurity thing to sort of at least slow it down or prevent it?
Well, that's why the Queensland government's, well, all the governments actually, but the Queensland government's the only one I can speak of. They've engaged our help in a way to advise them on what could happen on an outbreak. There's other people beside us, of course, people that do baiting and chopper shooters. So basically, at the moment, it's still in an advisable stage because it's not here. They have a plan, which I haven't actually seen yet, but they're drafting a plan. We're advising them on all aspects of what we do. And I believe that on June 30th, that the plan is going to be documented and released. So I'm waiting to hear that, because if it gets into Australia, they're estimating $5 billion worth of losses in sty pigs. And for example, China, they did tell us in one of the meetings that China has lost that much protein in their pork that has died from this disease, that Australia couldn't produce that much protein in beef, cattle and goats for 5 years. So that's how quickly it just obliterated their herds.
How close is African swine fever to it? So what's the nearest?
East Timor.
East Timor, yeah.
Well, people move between. Oh, COVID's probably slowed it down, but people move from East Timor to Australia fairly regularly.
Actually, I think the latest info might have been they feared it was in PNG, in which case it's about 40 kilometres from Australia.
40 kilometres, and 40 kilometres with a regular tinny parade running backwards and forwards. So
the greatest threat for the introduction is actually, though, the perceived greatest threat is from pork products brought in from overseas, and coming in through airports and things like that. However, one of the ways that they want to engage hunters is in terms of surveillance, and that's education modules that we're working with the Queensland government now on how to educate hunters to recognise the signs and what to do if you do see the signs, of anything that looks particularly unusual, and there's a specific set of circumstances that hunters will be educated in. So there's killing the pigs. That's one thing, but before it gets to that stage, they've got thousands and thousands of hunters out in the field every day of the week and in contact with subjects. Every day, and they're going to be the ones that bump into it in the wild. In most likely case, they're going to be absolutely central to early warning. So there'll be, all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that we've suggested is creating dead zones around commercial piggeries and things where they're hunted and fenced and all that sort of stuff. So, for instance, the big piggeries will have double fencing now, and they might have 1,000 acres. They'll have the perimeter really securely fenced. Where their piggery might cover 200 acres, and that's super security fence. So they're already working on those biosecurity controls. The commercial piggeries, they're not waiting. No one's waiting. Everyone's trying to do something. It's just a matter of coming up with a coordinated plan so everyone knows what everyone else is doing. But surveillance is the biggest thing that hunters will be asked to do straight away.
I suppose there you really need to know what to look for in regards to if you come across an animal and you've killed it, and you need to know when it doesn't look right and what to look for, whether it's something. I don't know anything about African swine, but maybe something in regards to the eyes or the saliva or something like that. So I presume someone will produce educational videos to help people recognise a pig that's contracted the disease.
Yes, certainly. We've already seen the draft of some of that information and offered comments and on some of the language too, because of can't be too, the sort of stuff that if you were studying veterinary science, the sort of language that might be used there is going to be different from the language you might use if you trying to reach pig hunters, you know. So that's part of our role in that is to assist with that communication. So we're up and keen, you know. We've been
Proactive.
well, and we're thrilled with how well our contributions been received, you know, by people involved with the African swine fever issue, because they recognise what hunters can do and what they know. Now, there's a vast range of knowledge that people who are dealing with an animal almost exclusively, like I said, every day, every night of the year, they know stuff about pig movements and about pig habits and about what pigs will do under pressure and won't do under pressure and this sort of thing. So some of that information is being sourced by the people working on the plan. And let me tell you, pig hunters are seen as central to the management of the issue.
Okay, gentlemen, we've gone an hour, more than an hour. I'd like to wrap it up now, but thanks very much. It's been a real interesting conversation. I'll just wrap up the show and introduce next week's show, and then we'll just have a little chat before you log off. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. That was episode 10. Next week in episode 11, I'll have Margaret Shaw on. She won an Australian Order of Australia medal for her efforts to resolve some of the problems with the insurance matters affecting North Queensland and the cost of insurance. And along with her, I'll have Andrew Turnover. He's also looking into the problems with insuring strata title properties. So that's next week's episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share and follow on Facebook, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.